okay, so we have to have a talk. First and foremost, I'm on the farm and the internet is limited. So if I pop out or pop back in as a result of the internet, it's because I'm using Starlink, not traditional internet that I would normally have. With that said, we need to talk. We need to talk about what's going on, the calculations, and how Social Security benefits are going to occur into the future. Many people are working on what they know, and what they know, for the most part, is wrong. And so there's a problem. Unfortunately, some of the graphs that are coming out from the actuarial department of the SSA are not what I would say completely accurate. And that's because they're forecasts. There's no way to be perfectly correct about a forecast into the future. We think something might go this way. We might see something go that way. We just don't know. So the accuracy is never going to be 100% correct going forward. However, this is incredibly important. We know that there are now certain factors above all that are causing these inaccuracies, and may be strong amounts of inaccurate numbers being used to describe what the losses of retirement benefits will be going into 2033 and 2034. Okay, so we're going to be talking about what the new largest Social Security cuts ever will actually be and how they will occur, and why we're not actually getting the proper information going forward. Please remember to like, and please remember to subscribe. Let's get into it. Okay, so why is this relevant? Most people expect to retire, right? Some will pass from cancer or a car accident before turning 62. However, most want to have access to roughly 15% FICA taxes that they pay in each year. So, depending on how you calculate it, and you can go a little bit this way, a little bit that way, it could be potentially 1.25 or 1.5 or 1 3/4 of every year, a month of every year. So 1.5 of every year, right? Months that you actually pay, earn money, pay taxes, etc. You're basically doing that for your Social Security benefits. And so one of the problems that people have is that if they're spending that much time, if you look at a 12-month cycle, right? And you're taking 1.25 of that month, 1.5 of that month. If you take that and you say, well, I'm just putting that away for the rest of my life, people expect to get a whole lot more. Now, all of you know from watching this channel, and it's been very clear that you understand Social Security benefits, they are essentially set up so that the poor get significantly more than the rich who pay in. The rich who pay in get very little in return, hardly anything. The poor who pay in get the most out of it. They have significant increases in what they receive. So you might be sitting there wondering, well, what the hell? Why am I only getting $1,000 a month? That's because the way it was set up, you may have back in the day dollars only paid in so much. And now for the rest of your life, in whether it's disability benefits or retirement benefits, you might reap the benefit of $200,000, $500,000, $1 million in benefits. And the reality backing that is this: you could have only paid in, let's say, $100,000 in benefits, and as an impoverished person, you could reap the benefit of potentially $200,000, $300,000, etc. And so we have a system that very much so is based to assist the impoverished. But at the end of the day, because of massive devaluation of the dollar, it's not enough. And that's a big problem. Now, here's the deal of what you need to know. After all of your taxes get paid, right after you pay in all that money, depending on how much you earn, it can range from somewhere around 10% to 50+%. See, some people would even say it goes up to 60%, depending on what county, state, etc. you get hit with. Certainly, if you're in a blue state, California, New Jersey, New York, or in a special city district where they're trying to reinvent it or whatever, you will pay massively higher amounts of taxes than even that. Okay. Now, bottom line is this. You have to understand that our tax system is broken to begin with. We pay taxes on the money we earn. And then when we buy things, we pay more taxes. And then when we go ahead and own bigger items, we get taxed every year to retain ownership of those items, right? That's like owning a car and having to pay for certain types of insurance, or having to pay for certain types of upkeep charges, tax charges, like your property taxes, etc. So it's built as a system to suck as much money out of the American people at different stages of use of that $1 bill. So you get a $1 bill, it gets taxed. You spend it, it gets taxed. You go ahead and Buy something with it that's big, it'll get taxed. Ultimately, 100% of whatever you make will be taxed out of that dollar, whether you retained it and kept buying things with it, or whether you gave it to somebody else and somebody else will get taxed by using it. Okay. That's why actual cash money, paper money, is something that the government is very interested in getting rid of going forward. Now, here's kind of the thing. A lot of people want to know what the future is when it comes to retirement benefits and disability benefits. What you have to understand is that we can increase taxes, and that is the agenda of the Democratic Party. It's always the agenda of the Democratic Party: tax and spend, right? That if anything is more fundamental, more so than democracy, more so than the word liberal, is the assurance that the Democrats will tax and spend, right? That is the base fundamental. If you wanted to know the primary focus of the Democratic Party is to tax and spend. It's not to preserve democracy, which is like, what? You can't even define that. That's a joke. When people are like, vote blue for democracy, you know that they don't know what they're talking about, because there's no way to perfectly align and define what that actually will equate to across the entire board. So that doesn't make sense, right? So the bottom line is, when it comes to this whole tax and spend identity, let's take a look at essentially the countries where people pay the highest personal income tax rates, okay? And you'd expect America, out of all the countries across the world, to be, I don't know, like 40 down, maybe 50 down, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of little countries that tax ridiculous amounts. So you would expect it to be pretty far down the line, okay? Let's go through it real quick. Belgium, 79.5%. Now remember, the more liberal, the more left-leaning, the more socialist-based countries that you come across, they're going to have the more ridiculous taxation options available. Because again, Democratic Party in America, it's about tax and spend. There's negatives to the Republican Party. We're just not covering them right now because they're not in power, A. B, we have to talk about taxes so you understand what's going to happen to these benefits in the future. Again, Belgium, 79.5%. Finland, 66.75%. Portugal, 64%. United Kingdom, 63.25%. Switzerland, 59.7%. Aruba, 58.95%. Estonia, 58.4%. Denmark, 57.11%. Japan, 55%. Austria, 55%. That's on the high end, right? Those are the places where you will get taxed the most if you earn the most, okay? Now, top 12 country, because, they use the wealthy to pay for the poor. That's how, and even the wealthy in those states pay for the middle class. Top 12 countries with the highest sales tax, Training Economics 2023. Let's go through this real quick. So this is sales tax, right? India, 28%, Hungary, 27%, Denmark, 25%, Norway, 25%, Sweden, 25%, Croatia, 25%, Greece, 24%, Finland, 24%, Iceland, 24%. Can you imagine that? Paying like 26, 27% on an item you buy? Portugal, 23%. Like, that's just insanity. Like, you would never buy anything. Like, it would be literally the destruction of economic prosperity, because in order to have a good economy, you have to go ahead and basically spend. You have to buy new stuff. Anyways, so, high sales tax is the death of capitalism and a good economy and being essentially an economy that can really compete. It's the death of it. And you'll notice they're very left-leaning, very socialism-based countries. You have extreme taxes because at the base fundamental, it is tax and spend. Okay. Now, where is the United States in taxing and spending? How aggressive is it, right? We expect it to be like 40 countries down, maybe 50 countries down. Let me go through. When they do the overall taxation assessment as to which countries have the worst taxes out of all of them, Belgium, Finland, Portugal, United Kingdom, Switzerland, Aruba, Estonia, Denmark, Japan, Austria, Spain, Canada, Sweden, Ireland. Number 15, the United States. So 15 down from the absolute worst taxation that could potentially occur is the United States. Okay, so just keeping that in mind, we are one of the most extreme taxation places on earth. We overtax, we overtax, we overtax. Okay, that's kind of like what student loans are. It's a massive tax to get people to learn how to do the stuff that they need to help society move forward. It's just a tax. That's what student loans are. Because when you take student loans out of the picture, it's just, we are going to educate this person so they can do a thing in society to help people and make money. It's just a tax on those people. That's all it is. Now, here's one thing you need to understand about that. We now know that America is a very, very, very left-leaning ideology, tax and spend nation. So when people are like, oh, they're extreme Republican or extreme this, they're not. They never have been. They're not. It is a more extreme left-leaning country. And you want to talk about the extreme other way, just go to the Middle East, right? That's very different there. They're still doing horrible things to their spouses if they don't make them a sandwich. It's a very different mentality, a very different ideology, okay? Now, here's the problem. Because we have a high taxation country and we are still having a runaway dollar, we have to examine why this is. Because Americans are paying a hell of a lot of money into this system. They are paying and paying and paying and paying. But yet, the next generation, this is the first time in history of a very long time that the millennials and Gen Zers are not making as much as they should, because they're making less than what they should have, because basically the economy has been crushed. And it's too much taxation, too many student loans. They can't get out from under the debt. And just to summarize what's happening with this stuff, just to understand, there are only two styles of living in America. There's survival and there is thriving. So boomers, they thrived, right? Gen Y, they thrived. The greatest generation before all of them, they thrived because they made kids. That's like the ultimate marker for whether or not a generation thrived. They felt safe enough financially. They felt safe enough with things going on around them that they actually went and produced more children. That's the ultimate bottom line designation for whether or not a group, a generation, is thriving or surviving. Okay. Here's the kicker. Let's go over to what's currently going on with the fertility rate. As you know, millennials, Gen Zers, they are de facto in survival mode. CDC came out with statistics. The general fertility rate in the United States decreased by 3% from 2022, reaching a historic low. This marks the second consecutive year of decline, following a brief 1% increase from 2020 to 2021. Because COVID, people were home. They had money coming in, they didn't have to work. From 2014 to 2020, the rate consistently decreased by 2% annually. These statistics and others from provisional 2023 birth data were released by CDC's National Center for Health Statistics. The new report basically analyzes data from more than 99% of birth certificates issued during that year. So highly accurate report. The report shows a 2% decline from 2022, with 3,591,328 births recorded in 2023. So basically, the 2023 birth rates declined for women ages 20 to 39 years, were unchanged for females aged 10 to 14 and 40 to 49. That's a culture thing. Just so you understand, the millennials, because that's mostly millennials and Gen Z, we can't afford to have kids. We can't. Our student loans are far too extreme. We can't afford literally to bring a new person into this world. There are people who bring people into this world right now that are part of that group, but many of them have both professional working parents, or they're reliant on a lot of state and county-based and federal programs to give them enough money to survive. And it's a tough existence for them. Okay, the birth rate for teenagers aged 15 to 19 was down 3% in 2023 to 13.2 births per 1,000 women. Just imagine that, 13.2 births per 1,000 women. The birth rate for women ages 20 to 24 reached a record low. The cesarean delivery rate increased by the fourth year in a row to 32.4% in 2023. The low-risk cesarean delivery rate increased to 26.6%. The preterm birth rate was essentially unchanged at 10.41%. All right, what does that tell you? It tells you that there is a cultural change occurring, because the men still have the capacity to make children. The women still have the capacity to have children. So a cultural change has occurred. What has changed? Obviously, the roles of a family don't exist anymore like they used to. The traditional find somebody, meet them, get married, have kids, grow a family, have the kids work on the farm, Little House on the Prairie doesn't exist anymore. What you have now are people trying to earn enough money to survive with massive student loans, an inability to get promotions, and basically a new level of racism never existing before now against white males. It was just released that Disney, through basically the VP on secret recordings, was saying that Disney will not hire white males for most projects or most functions at the corporation. Now, I can tell you as somebody who went to school and was never really given opportunities for special placement, special financial allowances and boosts and things like that. I never got that. And that's because it's this color and I'm a male. But back when I was going to school, white females were actually considered a minority. So what's happening now is we have this massive shift from basically minorities being the ones who are subjected to this terrible, terrible thing to now white males are being subjected to this terrible, terrible thing. So we have a culture. The group that made the most money, the group that paid the most taxes, white males, is now being basically biased against across the corporate board. So as a result of that, there's a problem. Now with the new DEI legislation, that group that the retired rely on to pay for their retirement, right, and their disability benefits and things like that, they can't afford to pay for it. Because as you know, every year, the people working and paying into it are paying for that retirement. Like when you pay in your money, that's not your money. Like a lot of people have a hard time understanding that, and I get it. Because politicians make them believe when you pay in money, it goes into a magical little account. There's no magical little account. That money is always spent each and every single year to go ahead and pay for those right now. So the people paying for the retired people right now are a little bit of Gen Yers, millennials, and a little bit of Gen Zers, okay? But mostly what we're looking at is the millennials taking up the big boost of it at this point. So what you have to understand is that the culture of men being this way and women being this way has changed, which is drastically harming the Social Security system. So one thing that I have had a lot of time to think about, which is what do I believe is the number one cause for the destruction of Social Security benefits? It's pretty clear in my head. It is not the reserve currency failing. It is not bad jobs in the U.S. It is not student loans. It's the change of culture. Because people, through all these other things, can't afford stuff, but people now have redesigned gender roles. And these redesigned gender roles significantly reduce the likelihood of two people getting together, staying together, having children, and those children being successful. And one of the things you have to keep in mind is that, and this is a tough thing to consider, so think about it, is that when you have children being made, you then have to raise them. You then have to get them to go ahead and go to school, achieve higher grades, learn as much as they can, go to higher level academia, continue to push forward. And then, of course, if you go the blue collar track, you'll do extremely well in the modern environment. But, obviously the higher level will get you more, right? If you're an electrician, you'll do better usually. So the bottom line is, it's not just making kids, right? It's not just the fertility rate. It's making children and training children to be the future vocational fields that we need filled. So, yes, it could be artificial intelligence taking away jobs. Yes, it could be the devaluation of our trade currency, of our US dollar being used internationally. Sure, but it's not. It is the new cultural changes, and a lot of people like the word woke, the woke changes to men being more feminine and women being more masculine, or no variation of any of the traditional things and just completely different. Or the new thing, which is to not have kids. That's a new thing. Can't afford them, don't want to bring anybody into this world because it's a bad world. That's a new, very common existence. So as a result of that, what you have to keep in mind is that unfortunately, we have now promoted especially over the past couple of years, this cultural designation where basically males and females don't feel comfortable creating a family like they used to because traditional values are the enemy. And I was telling somebody the other day, and I'll be very completely frank with you about it. A lot of you don't realize the aggression that's come against basically in this country, which has nothing to do with, obviously, people in Ukraine. Like the citizens of this country that are Jewish have very little to do with the citizens that are Jewish in Israel, rather. So as a result of that, you get a lot of people being aggressive towards could be Ashkenazis, which are Jewish German individuals that have moved over to this country. And I was talking with a Christian, and the Christian was like, "Yeah, I don't know what's the deal with that. You know what I mean? It's just wow, And I looked at them and I was just like, well, throughout history, sometimes the Muslim world has been potentially aggressive against Christians or potentially aggressive against the Jewish population. There were entire wars fought over that in these now Middle Eastern countries where some of the most important Christian churches were, and now those Christian churches have become mosques. And these were the most important Christian churches in existence, not just like in that area. Literally the most important churches in existence were in the Middle East, which are now mosques. And that's why they had those holy wars. So what I realized was that Christians, a lot of them don't realize the historical reference of them being aggressively gone after. And I think if we have another 4 more years of this type of existence and leadership in this country, we will start to see Christians being put more in that being aggressively gone against category, where basically there will be more preference, even more so for Middle Eastern individuals that are Muslim-based religion. And so as I was saying this to them, I said, look, you get another 4 more years of this, you have to be okay with the reality that there's going to be more religious intolerance. And, and he was saying, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, remember, you don't see it because you don't have any Jewish background like I do. You know what I mean? You're kind of blind to it. You're living in this like, hey, everything's fine because it's not affecting me. But, realize another 4 years of this, they're going to be arresting Christians for just being Christians and doing Christian-like things. And the person was just like, there's no way. I can't even believe that, yada, yada. And I was like, well, take a gander. Take a look. Go look at some of the religious practices of the more aggressive Christians and go look at the federal government and how they're arresting those individuals for taxation relief, for selling products to their countrymen that are all part of the same religion and not doing taxation. Go look at it. It's not as simple as just, oh, somebody was speaking the Bible and they got arrested. No, there's many levels to this. There's essentially, things of practicing the Bible and not paying your federal taxes because you sold to, Kelly's kid an apple. And yet federal taxes, state taxes weren't paid. All of a sudden, they're going to want to come and take your tractor away that you were able to farm that tractor with. So you have to understand, it's a very interesting situation where Americans tend to be removed, right? And I don't know if it's just a lack of history studying or just the memories are very short, but they tend to be very removed from the history that makes them who they are. So one of the things in the homework assignment that I'm going to give you guys from this video is to go ahead and consider at 2-year intervals exactly where you were 2 years ago, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, 2 years ago. And the best way to do it, and I do this all the time, which is why it's been a very frightening past couple of years. If you go back 2 years and pick out the most important thing that happened 2 years ago, that is your focal point. That is your moment where you say, okay, I remember 2 years ago, this movie came out and I loved it. I remember 2 years before that, I bought that car. I remember 2 years before that, my brother had a kid. And 2 years before that, there was this event that happened with my work. Culturally, think about where things were then and where things are now. It took a relatively short period of time to go from a system that was very Christian. America was very Christian, right? I don't think anybody disagrees. It was founded on that, right? To now anti-Christian practice, right? That's what it is. It's a very anti-Christian, churches, are viewed by many to be bad, viewed by many to be a terrible thing. I'm not getting into whether or not Christianity is good for you or bad for you or whatever, but the point is, just look at the timeline and you'll see it didn't take long for us to get to this point, and it's a very interesting study. Now, here's what you need to understand about this whole situation as it goes forward, okay? The bottom line is that we have a problem when it comes to our currency. So you know that there's a fertility rate problem. They're not making enough kids. That's a big issue because down the line, there won't be enough children being born to work and pay taxes, to pay for disability benefits and retirement benefits. And as you know, and I've told it to you many times, 2033 represents essentially the moment in time where they know the trust fund will run out and people will have a significant reduction of their benefits. And they've known about it since the 80s, as politicians always do. And they've done nothing about it since then because they've been afraid to, because their changes in the early 80s, they just weren't good enough. They were aggressive. And it just shows us that they mishandled the money that was being paid in. They didn't do proper investments. There's a problem here. Our currency, which is traded with other nations, right? So here's what you need to know about basically what's happening with that situation. Okay. So there is this thing called the petrodollar, right? Okay. So other countries, and I got this basically from a Money Watch website that goes through things. Other countries are no longer following the petrodollar. The petrodollar is the dollar that's used to pay for and trade for oil internationally, right? So when ExxonMobil wants to sell this to this country or do this with that country, other countries have to buy the US dollar, keep a lot of US dollars in reserve to go ahead and buy and sell the oil that they need to make their country work, to make engines spin. That's the whole point of it, right? Okay, so there are several factors I'm going to read to you specifically from their analysis of this that have led to the dollar maintaining its intentional reserve currency status. One is so-called the petrodollar. The vast majority of the world's oil transaction occurs in dollars. As the global oil trade amounts to billions of dollars per day and all countries need energy, this creates a great deal of demand for dollar to facilitate these transactions. Cool. So now you know petrodollar just means oil companies, other countries got to buy oil from them. They use US dollars. Because there's that many US dollars out there, right, it helps us have a stronger currency, right? If everybody's using our currency, it makes our currency worth more. To that point, the Federal Reserve estimated that between 1999 and 2019, so like right before COVID, the dollar accounted for 96% of international trade transactions in the Americas, 74% in the Asia area, and 79% around the rest of the globe. So we had de facto a monopoly. A huge monopoly on our US dollar being used around the globe. Globally, banks use dollars for approximately 60% of their non-domestic deposits and loans. And in the foreign exchange market today, the US dollar is on one side of almost 90% of all transactions. However, okay, the US dollar now accounts for, right? So we got 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. Again, now it's past 2019. So 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. 5-year difference here. It's actually less than 5 years. Okay, so remember how I was saying, think about where you were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. Less than 5 years ago. Now to the current. Okay, the US dollar now accounts for 58% of foreign exchange reserves held by overseas central banks, a record low. Gold, the most ancient, widely accepted international currency, has chipped away at some of the dollar's dominance, accounting for 15% of reserves, up from 11% 6 years ago. The dollar is rampantly not being used by other countries. Against this backdrop, leaders of countries such as China, India, and Brazil. China and India are important to us. Like, we get a lot of products from them. They do a lot of production. China and India are massive manufacturing. They're just superpowers when it comes to manufacturing. Okay, so these groups have been calling for moves to trade directly with each other in their own currencies while cutting the US dollar out of its equation. This would incrementally diminish the role and importance of dollars while creating a multipolar financial world where the next tier of economics would have significantly more say in global affairs. So what they're saying is the US would lose a lot of dominance. These other countries would essentially retain dominance or would gain dominance, and there would be a new world order. Okay. In August 2023, this idea was taken even further. Russia and South Africa, along with the aforementioned three countries, China, India, and Brazil, compromise what's known as BRICS, a group of emerging countries in a loose economic alliance to counter Western influence. At an August summit, BRICS agreed to induct 6 new countries into its bloc: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Now keep in mind, Saudi Arabia just got rid of a lot of its US currency that it held in reserve, and it's now going to be working more closely with China. So they've chosen their path in case a world war were to exist going forward. Now, these admittances will make even more imposing a group of nations that already accounts for about 40% of the global population. But more importantly, Brazilian President Lula da Silva floated the idea of creating a single BRICS currency that members could use to transact with one another. No concrete plans were ever committed to. Basically, it's just a verbalization. So we'll see what they're going to be doing with that. Now, while no BRICS currency is imminent, the idea is out there and it's no longer a harebrained and fringe concept. A future counterweight to the greenback, which is, of course, what we call the US dollar, could take a number of different forms, such as a central bank digital currency or a stable coin, a basket of existing BRICS currencies, or a currency backed by precious metals like gold and silver. They can't use gold and silver because there's not enough of it that we have access to that we can, get out of the ground quick enough. So what will happen is these other countries will force the hand of the United States by dropping US dollar. They'll start their own currency, or they'll just use their own currencies. We'll trade, our dollar will significantly devalue, and we will have the worst inflation in the modern history of the US dollar. Okay, so keeping that in mind, if the dollar gradually loses its place atop the world financial pyramid, what would happen next? For the US, it would likely mean less access to capital. People can't borrow as much money. They can't get, home loans, right? And that's important because remember, when this reduction in retirement benefits happens, a lot of retired people are going to sell their homes. Well, regular humans won't be able to buy those homes because there will be a reduced amount of capital that humans can get to buy a home, which means that only corporations will be able to buy up all these homes, which will destroy the multi-35 to $50 trillion of housing and bank accounts and precious whatevers that will be transferred from, of course, your people in the boomer era to the millennials. That's the greatest wealth exchange that you can expect in the future, right? The boomer to the millennial exchange, that will be significantly reduced because most boomers will have to sell their precious items just to be able to survive. Okay. Now, so it means less capital to access, can't borrow as much. Fewer home loans, fewer car loans, stuff like that. Higher borrowing costs, right? The percentage of return, we won't be talking about like, oh, it's 7%, oh, it's 10%. It'll be like 20, 25, 30, 40%, ridiculous numbers. And lower stock market values. So basically, the valuation of these stocks will be lower, which will hurt everybody who put money into the stock market. Having the world's reserve currency has allowed the U.S. to run large deficits in terms of both international trade and government spending. If foreigners no longer want to hold dollars for savings, it would force significant belt tightening at home. Let me read that to you again, or I'll just paraphrase it. They cannot borrow this much debt, so they will have to then offset and pay off this debt, which we can't because we don't have enough people working to pay off the debt. And in the future, we don't have enough new children being born over the past 10 years, over the past 15 years, to replace how many humans are in America as it is. Our population is shrinking. That's why when people talk about immigrants, we need them. And we need their culture of having lots and lots of kids over and over and over again to actually create humans to make taxable work product, okay? So if foreigners no longer want to hold US dollars for savings, it would force significant belt tightening at home. It means that we wouldn't have the lifestyle Americans traditionally have. People aren't going to be owning homes. People aren't going to be owning cars. People are going to be living paycheck to paycheck and benefit check to benefit check. As for what would replace the dollar, it's hard to forecast at this point. It's possible to imagine a world in which the euro or Chinese yuan eventually becomes the primary reserve currency. but a great deal would have to change in world politics to get to that point. How many of you know people that go to a manufacturing warehouse? Very few of you do. Very few of you do. It's because they're very rare in the United States. Whoever holds those holds the key to the ownership of making their currency worth more in the future. AI and robots will change that, sure, but that is the key right now. Now, let's talk about something important here. What will happen when it comes to 2033? The estimate is that people will make around, so like imagine your retirement check, you'll get around $324 less per month. Again, $324 less per month, okay? So whatever your retirement check is right now, just imagine losing around $324. That's the average. Could be more, could be a little less, right? You will receive in around 9 years the same amount that you're currently receiving right now. That's what their math is based off of. Every month that Congress waits to find a solution, it becomes far more expensive to fix the problem. Literally billions of dollars each month extra because we didn't fix it this month. Also, Congress has known about this problem since the 80s. So the important thing to kind of remember with this situation is that we now say, okay, is it really going to be 9 to 10 years from now that we're going to have this collapse of the Social Security system where the retirement benefit pool will not be enough to pay people their actual 100% retirement check that they're used to getting? Will they take SSDI benefits, put them into the retirement fund, and give another year to retirement benefits? Probably. If push comes to shove, they'll do that. Here's what's important to remember. I do not believe that the 9 to 10 year calculation is accurate because they are not properly calculating in how quickly our US dollar is losing strength in international market use. Now, do you ever think about this? You have one party who's not very favorable towards the petrodollar, aka not very favorable towards oil companies, aka oil, get away from carbon, get away from all that, yada yada. Here's the ironic thing. The only thing that allows America to be America is the petrodollar. That's the big factor, right? That international trade that allowed us to build up debt to $34 and $35 trillion. So ironically, we're in such a bad financial spot. The only thing that can save us is the reliance on the petrodollar, which we are somehow under this political regime running away from. It's interesting. Is gasoline terrible for the earth? Absolutely. Absolutely. Will lots of people starve in this country as a result of where we're going with things? Absolutely. Which is worse? You get to decide. You get to decide. Now, here's the thing. So international reserve currency, that's a problem. How much money other countries reserve to pay for things in the US dollar? That's one thing. Low birth rates. That's a huge thing. That's a cultural thing. We could change it, but we're going culturally in the wrong direction for that, right? We're going more towards basically people not having traditional systems. And we can't have a traditional family anymore. Like this whole, I was talking with a Republican, an older one the other day, and they were telling me if we just went back to having dinner at the table or dinner every Sunday where the whole family came together. And I looked at them and I said, what world are you living in? Like, where would you ever think that would occur going forward? That like everybody, all the cousins and brothers and uncles and aunties and this and that and all the grandparents, everybody got together on Sunday and had a meal. Like, what world do you think? Who? Where? When? How would that even be? Nobody lives next to each other like they used to. Like, how would that even be reality? And so what they were really getting at, because I went after them a little bit on this, was picking up the culture of how the older generations lived would benefit the culture of younger individuals. That was their thesis. That was their promoting idea, right? But at the same time, it's an impossibility. You're never getting women to go back to how it was for women back in the day, which was not always great. A lot of people talk about, oh, this and that. No, women didn't, they didn't have the right to vote. They didn't have the right, they could be abused as individuals. It wasn't good for women's rights. Now women have incredible rights, right? You're not going to see women out there climbing trees to cut them, or on an oil rig, handling the rig, right? Handling the jib as you're not going to see them doing that stuff. But they have jobs, and they tend to get most of the jobs that are, your in-office administrative function-based work jobs, right? Because to be fair, that's the system we have. We have the people that can't do the very aggressive, hardcore blue labor jobs, right? The very difficult blue labor job. You can't put, traditional women into those jobs. So they've taken up those positions that make a lot of sense for them. And this happens always culturally. We always see this. If you look at Jewish people, you're going to see a lot of doctors and lawyers and accountants. That's where they went. If you look at African Americans, you're going to see sports. You're going to be seeing, like new businesses, this and new ideas that. You're going to see a lot of innovation. We culturally tend to go towards what we are good at, right? And having, a female who has to lift a 100-pound item, carry it on their back to the location, put the thing on, and then jump into the water and weld a pipe at 500 feet down or whatever. It doesn't work, right? You have to have a more additional strength because we haven't figured out how to make the suit less heavy or whatever. I'm sure they could if they had newer technologies and blah blah blah. And I'm all for it. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm all for women getting out on that oil rig and making it happen. I am all for women, climbing that tree and doing the logging. I'm all for it. It's just right now, as it is, not appropriate and realistic. Do you guys notice the vote? All right, they were going to add women to the vote to have them be conscripted into basically the military if there was a war-related situation, just like men have. Because we know, right, when it comes to women's rights, women now have all of the rights. There's no rules that exist for women that basically, don't give them an equivalent version of what men have. Except there are rights where we don't put them in harm's way. We're never going to force them into the military under the current model. Maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 3 years, we will, because we keep going left, right? And the left says absolute equality, women shave their head, put them in the military, and force them on the front lines. Absolutely. And I don't mean that to scare you away from the left. That's what it is. The right side, where this literal bill came up for a vote, the Republicans said, absolutely no way. I'm never putting my little girl to be forced into the military. Absolutely no way. And that's because on the Republican side, the men and also the women tend to look at them more as these beautiful dolls, right? These up on the shelf. We don't want to harm them. We don't want them to be in a dangerous way. And whereas on the left, it's more of like, okay, let them fend for themselves. Let them fend. If somebody walks into the bathroom that's, not of the traditional background that they are, let them fend for themselves. If let them go into the military, let them go ahead and be on the front lines. Have them put, we'll make a special backpack that's lighter. You know what I mean? So whatever. The point is, that's the reality, is that more to the Republican side, women are these precious baby-making machines, right? And on the Democrat side, equality above all. And it's not that either one is wrong or either one is right. It's just two different styles of approaching it. So what happens is this. We have, and see, Eve put it well, as objects. The Republican side definitely views women more as like objects, right? This is more like a beautiful car, like this. But to be fair, the other side of that thinking, like I know that kind of attacks it, but the other side of that thinking is, hey, look, they produce children, like they carry the child and actually make the child. And we need children for capitalism and this economy to work, for our nation to not be horrible, to not have massive homelessness, to not have like LA, San Francisco levels of homelessness. In order to go ahead and have a great economy, we need to have kids. And to be fair, women are a little bit more important when it comes to making kids. I know some people would disagree with me, but you know what I mean? They do carry the child, Let me give you an idea, okay? You have a man and a woman, and we're doing traditional definitions. We're not doing, they had a change, down south or any of that stuff. We're doing like more traditional definitions of male and female, okay? Although you could, of course, change it however you need to, however you like to, with whatever pronouns you like. If you go ahead and have, two people come together, formation of the beginning of a child, right? And then you have that male 6 months from that moment drink to the point in which he gets drunk and loses consciousness. And you have the female do the exact same thing. What will harm the child more? Obviously, the female. Same thing with smoking. Same thing with using things that, enhance the mental state or lower the depression, whatever. Obviously affected more by the female doing those things than the male doing those things. So if traditional, we're saying male and female, yada, yada, born, obviously women have more relevance to the creation of children. And in that regard, they should be protected more as a group from potential harm from that. Or, of course, you can disagree with me. You can say equality, put them on the front line of the war when World War III happens. Now, that brings me to what are the fixes to this? Because a lot of people want to know how they can fix the retirement problem, because they know that if there's not enough retirement, things get bad. And I mean real bad, real fast, because, old people without money, that's just a bad situation. Also, I missed a person who donated before. I'm going to do a thing later for them, but Sen McQuire, $1.99 donation. I super appreciate it. China and Russia hold the most gold reserves. I don't know. Do they? I don't know. Sen McGuire, send me the stats on that. Post them in the comment section. Tara, good to see you again. I love that photo too, by the way. Tara Denise, $2.99 donation. Very, very cool. Excellent, excellent. Love the little rock star thingamajiggy there. Awesome. Now, with this said, okay, what are the fixes? How do we fix this so that the retired don't have a reduction in their benefits, so that the disabled don't get thrown to the wolves and have their entire trust fund put into the retirement trust fund, and then they're looking at having a reduction as well, okay? Number one, we need to get something done, changed with these extremely high educational costs. And we need to do some sort of complete revocation or reduction of student loans. These kids that are now adults, they can't innovate. They can't get out of the hole that they're in. Their credit cards are maxed. They can barely afford the car that they have to buy, which is like $700 to $800 a month for a car. That's like a reliable car, not some used car that like I would rebuild. But we shouldn't expect everybody to know how to rebuild a car. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I grew up on a farm. I'm going to know how to climb a tree. I'm going to know how to ride a tractor. I'm going to know how to use a fork. I'm going to know how to do these things. But to be fair, we shouldn't require that people know how to rebuild a truck. Right? That shouldn't be our standard. So it shouldn't be that expensive to buy something like that, like a car where it's $700 to $800 a month on average. It used to be 500 some, now it's 800-ish, right? So cost of education. All that is a way to basically enslave individuals to a full lifetime of paying back to get them educated to just do a job. You ever think about that? That's all it is. So we need to do something about these student loans, because they're just completely putting everybody, instead of in the thrive category and making kids, in the survival category of just being able to pay for their own food at Walmart. Number two, we need the dollar's value to rise again and to increase international trade with that dollar. Will there ever be that? Maybe. Maybe. And here's the only way you're going to see that. And I want to be very, very clear with this. The only way we will see the US dollar having alpha status, right? Complete alpha, this is what everybody's using, alpha status. The only way we're going back to that is if, number one, we have a World War III. That's it. That's the only way. Take a moment and consider, what does the U.S. have that is better than any other nation on earth, right? What does the U.S. have? It has a massive military. A massive military that can go ahead and basically, take over whatever it wants. We have the best military by far. If there was a world war and other countries, like in World War II, were destroyed, their economic systems were destroyed, then America could essentially reestablish itself, because of its military strength, as the primary alpha force on Earth. And it could force other countries, while rebuilding, to have to use the US dollar again. That is the only way the US can create a scenario where we strengthen the dollar again. Otherwise, the dollar will continue to devalue at a significant rate over a rather short period of time. That's the reality. So we've now gone through the problems of the reduction of benefits, what's to be expected, why I believe that their calculations going forward are going to be wrong. How will their calculations change if they are wrong? Well, the amount of time that benefits get significantly reduced, which is the largest reduction in the history of Social Security benefits, basically has ever occurred, right? It would be the most epic failure on behalf of the SSA ever. That 9-year period, that 2033 deadline right here, that would shorten. You'd be looking at 2030, right? Things like that. Another thing, the amount that it would actually be reduced by, instead of seeing potentially a loss of, and I'll go back to the actual specific number here so that you have the average number. Instead of seeing essentially a reduction of $324 less in 2033, so it was a big chunk taken away, what you would see is essentially more of like $500, $600, $700 reduction, because there wouldn't be enough being paid in. Because remember, the almighty thing is how many people pay in, like 2 point something, 7-ish, to how many people receive, 1. This number doesn't change, 1. This number always changes, and it keeps getting worse. There's not enough people paying into the system for the one person receiving. So what I believe will happen is that America will either diminish significantly in existence and relevance across the earth, or it will force its hand and go into war. As you know, we already have 2 quasi-wars that we're paying for. We pay for, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bases across the entire earth, where we keep stockpiles of things that go boom, right? It is my belief that over the next 3 to 4 years, America will have to go to war. It will have to reestablish its dominance by destroying other countries and their trade routes to reestablish the US dollar and force them to use that to bolster the worth of the US dollar going forward. It will also have to try and reignite the idea of people being in relationships, reduction of the divorce rate, and basically a better system of education that does not force people for the rest of their life to be in student loan debt. I'm down to $300,000. I'm just under $300,000. I was half a million dollars when I got out, when I was 27, from my undergrad, master's, doctorate, and then some certificate stuff thereafter. That's to be a lawyer. To do this video, to have this knowledge, to be able to interact with all this stuff. So Jim Tillapaw, thank you for the $9.99 donation. That's awesome. What do you think about taxing remittances to help out the Social Security problem? What do you think about taxing remittances to help out the social? Okay, so I don't see it as a bad thing. I think that taxing is going to be a problem for the Republicans. At the end of the day, I think that the main issue is that we can continue to tax different forms. We can tax the wealthy more. We can tax the middle class more, which is really who usually gets screwed in this. We can tax international trade more. We can tax all these different options. But at the end of the day, what is a tax? It is a nail directly into the flesh of capitalism. And capitalism is the only thing that allows us to buy the food and the gasoline and the butter and the milk for the cheap price that we do. That's it. That's the thing. So, and remember, the more these things go up in value, you won't be buying the gallon. You'll be buying the half gallon, and then even smaller, and then even smaller. And then you'll get to the point, and some of you already are, where each week you have to get more money from some other person to be able to afford to buy the food to be able to survive. And you know this, and this is how Europe is. Some people have to get paid for that week to survive and eat to go work for the next week. That is much more the direction of where America is going. So anyways, I will catch you guys a little bit later. I will see you at the next video. The next video is going to be specifically on things that Social Security recipients can no longer afford. Every year I do this video. And I use it as a checkpoint. And it used to be items that, were classic this, disabled, retired, they used to be able to afford certain types of steaks, certain types of events like golfing this or doing that. And now it's at a much, much worse spot. And I looked at, going back in time, my earlier videos, and I was amazed at how the disabled and retired have lost so much of their spending capacity to buy things to make their life better. So my point is, I will see you at the next video, which is what buying loss or potential to buy items the retired and disabled have lost over the past year. I will see you soon at the next video. Please remember to like. Please remember to subscribe. Also, please remember, I go live on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We've got the internet quasi working. I'll try to do more videos over the next couple of days. Also, please remember, if you need more than just the live where I answer questions on Tuesday and Thursday, you get like 5 to 7 minutes to use a fake name when you call in. It's the 407-279-1754 phone number. You can call me. Obviously, most of you didn't subscribe to Disability Attorney in America. If you have a disability problem that requires more than 5 to 7 minutes, a lot of people are hiring me for that 1 hour. There's a mini contract below where I put you on my hearing calendar as like a 1 hour, like its own little hearing. And then we go through your documents and figure out a solution and path for you to go ahead and complete the thing. With that said, please have a wonderful, wonderful day. I will be back in about 10 minutes and we will go from there. Thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful day. All right, I'll catch you a little bit later. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.